He was a man who could buy cities a titan of industry, whose name was whispered with awe in boardrooms across the globe. She was a woman who counted her tips just to afford her mother's medication. Her world confined to the four walls of a struggling diner. They existed in different universes, destined never to meet. But on one rainy Tuesday night, in a moment of crisis that made the entire restaurant hold its breath, a simple act of human kindness, an act no one else dared to offer, would shatter the walls between their worlds. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the story of how a single touch changed everything, proving that the greatest fortune isn't what you have, but what you are willing to give. The rain didn't just fall on New York City that Tuesday. It waged war. It hammered against the panoramic windows of the Gilded Sparrow, a restaurant where the price of an appetizer could cover Maya Ross's rent for a month. Inside, the light was the color of honey, and the air smelled of truffle oil and quiet wealth. For Maya, it smelled like survival. Each perfectly placed fork, each refilled water glass, each feigned pleasant smile was a small step away from the financial abyss that yawned at the edge of her life. Her real life was a cramped two-bedroom apartment in Queens that always smelled faintly of antiseptic, and her mother's lavender-scented soap. Her mother, Laura, was a prisoner in her own body. A brilliant artist whose hands, once capable of coaxing life from clay, were now curled and uncooperative from the relentless progression of multiple sclerosis. The tips Maya earned didn't go to new shoes to replace the ones with soles worn thin as paper. They went to Copay's experimental treatments and the crushing weight of pharmacy bills. Tonight, the restaurant was unusually quiet, the storm keeping the usual throngs of socialites at bay. That's why she noticed them the moment they walked in. The man was tall with a severe posture that seemed carved from granite. His suit was a shade of charcoal so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it, tailored with a precision that bespoke immense wealth. His name was Alistair Beaumont, though Maya didn't know it. She just knew he radiated an aura of untouchable power and profound weariness. With him was a boy of about 10, seated in a highly customized, sleek black wheelchair. His limbs were thin, his movements uncoordinated. His head was supported by a brace, but his eyes, a startling, intelligent blue, darted everywhere, taking in the opulent surroundings with a keen awareness. This was Finn, the maitre d', a man who prided himself on fawning over celebrities and CEOs, led them to a secluded corner booth. His smile was stretched thin, his discomfort palpable. People didn't know how to act around disability, especially when it was paired with the kind of wealth that usually bought perfection. Maya was assigned their table. "Good evening," she said, her voice soft but clear. "My name is Maya, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with some water?" The man, Alistair, didn't look at her. His focus was entirely on his son, adjusting a blanket over his legs. "2 still waters, and the boy will have the pureed butternut squash soup. Make sure it's not too hot." His tone was clipped dismissive. It was the tone of a man used to issuing commands and having them obeyed without question. Maya simply nodded. Of course. She felt the eyes of her co-workers on her, a mixture of pity and relief that they hadn't gotten the difficult table. She ignored them. She saw the boy Finn trying to communicate something with his father, his hands twitching in a frustrated attempt to form a sign. Alistair seemed to understand, leaning in to listen to the soft, breathy sounds the boy made. As Maya served their soup, she made a point to speak to both of them. "Here is your butternut squash soup, Finn," she said, placing the bowl carefully in front of him. "I hope you enjoy it." For the first time, the boy's vivid blue eyes locked onto hers. A small, crooked smile touched his lips. It was a fleeting, beautiful thing. Alistair's head snapped up, his gaze sharp and analytical, as if he were surprised she had addressed his son directly. He said nothing, but a flicker of something unreadable passed through his cold grey eyes. The meal progressed in near silence, punctuated only by the clink of Alistair's silverware and the distant rumble of thunder. Then it happened. A waiter carrying a large tray of desserts stumbled near their table. He didn't fall, but a silver dome clattered loudly onto the marble floor. The metallic crash was like a gunshot in the hushed room. Finn's reaction was instantaneous and violent. His body went rigid. A loud, distressed cry tore from his throat, raw and full of panic. His arms flailed, knocking his water glass over. The sound, the sudden chaos, it was too much for his overstimulated senses. He began to keen a high, piercing sound of pure terror and overload. A hush fell over the restaurant. Diners turned to stare, their expressions ranging from annoyance to morbid curiosity. A woman at a nearby table audibly sighed and muttered to her companion, "You'd think they could afford a private nurse." Alistair's face became a mask of controlled fury and deep, agonizing shame. He moved to soothe his son, his movements stiff and practiced. "It's all right, Finn. Shh, it's just a noise. We're okay." But his own tension was making it worse. Finn's cries only grew louder, his small body trembling uncontrollably. The maitre d' started toward the table, a look of placating horror on his face, ready to politely ask them to leave. Maya's manager shot her a frantic look that clearly meant, "Get them out of here now." But Maya didn't see a problem to be managed. She saw a terrified little boy. Ignoring the stares and the silent orders from her boss, she moved to the table. She didn't reach for Finn. Instead, she knelt down so she was at his eye level, entering his world, instead of trying to pull him into hers. "Hey, Finn," she said, her voice a low, calming hum beneath his cries. "That was a really loud, nasty sound, wasn't it? It scared me, too." She didn't try to touch him yet. She held up her hands where he could see them. "My name is Maya. Can I show you something my mum taught me? It helps when the world gets too loud." Alistair had frozen his hand, hovering over his son's shoulder. He was watching her, his expression a mixture of suspicion and desperation. Finn's cries hitched his gaze, flickering toward her. "It's called finding your anchor." Maya continued, her voice impossibly serene amidst the tension. "You just need to hold on to something solid, like this." She gently took Finn's flailing hand. It was damp and cold. She didn't just hold it. She applied a firm, steady pressure, a technique she'd learned from one of her mother's occupational therapists. "Feel that. That's me. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." She then guided his other hand to the smooth, cool edge of the marble table. "And feel that that's the table. It's strong. It's not moving." She started to hum a simple, toneless melody, the same one she used when her mother's pain was at its worst. It was a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through her hand into his. Finn's keening softened to a whimper. His breathing, which had been ragged and shallow, began to deepen. He was still trembling, but the violent rigidity was leaving his body. Slowly, instinctively, he leaned forward. His head came to rest against her shoulder, his small body surrendering to her calm. Maya didn't flinch. She simply wrapped one arm around his back, holding him with a gentle, solid strength. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a sanctuary. The entire restaurant was dead silent. Every eye was on this scene, the millionaire's distraught son being held not by his powerful father, but by a waitress in a cheap black uniform. The woman who had complained earlier now looked down at her plate in shame. From his position standing helplessly beside his son Alistair, Beaumont watched. He saw the way she held Finn, not with pity, but with a profound, unassuming competence. He saw the way his son, who recoiled from the touch of most strangers, melted into her embrace. He saw an act of pure, uncalculated kindness in a world where he believed every action had a price. For the first time in a decade, the armor around Alistair Beaumont's heart cracked. He watched for a full minute as she just held his son humming softly until the trembling stopped completely. Finally, she eased Finn back into his chair. The boy looked exhausted, but calm. He kept his small hand resting on hers. Maya finally looked up at Alistair. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a quiet empathy. "He's okay," she said softly. "Just a sensory overload." Alistair couldn't speak. He simply stared, his mind reeling. He was a man who commanded legions of employees, who moved markets with a single phone call. But in that moment, he had been utterly powerless to comfort his own child. And this woman, this complete stranger, had done it with an ease that was nothing short of miraculous. He reached into his jacket, his hand shaking almost imperceptibly. He pulled out a thick, heavy wallet and extracted not cash, but a single, stark, white business card. He laid it on the table next to her hand. "My office," he said, his voice hoarse. "Be there tomorrow, 10 a.m. He threw a few $100 bills on the table, enough to cover the meal a dozen times over. He didn't wait for a response. He carefully maneuvered Finn's wheelchair, and without a backward glance, guided his son out of the restaurant and into the stormy night, leaving Maya kneeling on the floor, the silent, stunned stares of the entire room on her, and a heavy linen business card resting on the table. It read simply, "Alistair Beaumont, CEO. Beaumont Enterprises." The business card felt like a block of lead in Maya's pocket all night. It was a tangible piece of a world so far removed from her own, it might as well have been from another planet. Beaumont Enterprises. Even she knew that name. It was a hydra-headed conglomerate with tentacles in finance technology and real estate. The man Alistair Beaumont was a modern-day Midas, and he wanted to see her. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named Gerald, had cornered her the moment Beaumont left. He hadn't fired her as she'd expected. He'd seen the wad of cash on the table and the awe on the other patrons' faces. "Whatever you did, Ross," he'd hissed, "don't screw it up." Sleep was impossible. Maya sat at her mother's bedside, watching the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Laura was asleep, her face peaceful for once, free from the pain that was her constant companion. The sight strengthened Maya's resolve. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Desperation was a powerful motivator. What was the worst that could happen? He could yell at her, fire her from a job she already hated. She had to go. The next morning, she chose her best and only interview outfit, a pair of black slacks that were slightly faded at the knees, and a simple white blouse she'd ironed 3 times. She stood in front of her cracked bedroom mirror and saw not a woman on her way to meet a billionaire, but a tired girl playing dress-up. Doubt gnawed at her. This was a mistake. He was probably going to reprimand her for overstepping, for embarrassing him. Beaumont Tower was not a building. It was a statement, a shard of obsidian and steel that pierced the Manhattan skyline. It was designed to intimidate, to make anyone who entered feel small and insignificant. It worked. The lobby was a cavern of gleaming marble and silent, imposing security guards. When Maya nervously gave her name to the receptionist, the woman's perfectly manicured fingers danced across a keyboard. "Ah yes, Miss Ross, Mr. Beaumont is expecting you. 88th floor." The elevator ride was a silent, stomach-lurching ascent. When the doors opened, it was to a world of hushed efficiency. People in impeccably tailored suits moved with quiet purpose. The air was different up here, thinner, smelling of money and ambition. A woman with a severe black bob and an expression of cool appraisal met her at the reception desk. "Miss Ross, I am Genevieve Dubois, Chief Operating Officer of Beaumont Enterprises. Mr. Beaumont is waiting." Her handshake was firm and brief, her eyes scanning Maya's simple attire with a flicker of disdain so quick it was almost imperceptible. Genevieve led her down a long corridor, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of their footsteps. She paused outside a set of towering mahogany doors. "A word of advice," Genevieve said, her voice low and smooth as silk, but with an edge of steel. "Mr. Beaumont values efficiency and discretion. He is not a man who appreciates emotional displays." The unspoken message was clear. Whatever happened last night, it was an anomaly. Don't think it makes you special. Inside the office was larger than Maya's entire apartment. One entire wall was a window with a godlike view of the city below. Alistair Beaumont was not sitting behind his massive desk. He was standing by the window, looking down at the city, his back to her. Finn was there too, in his wheelchair, looking at a picture book on a tablet. "Mr. Beaumont," Genevieve announced. "Miss Ross is here." He turned. In the sharp morning light, he looked even more imposing than he had in the dim restaurant. The weariness was still there, etched into the lines around his eyes, but it was overshadowed by an intensity that was almost physical. "Leave us," he said to Genevieve. Her smile tightened for a fraction of a second, before she gave a curt nod and closed the doors behind her, leaving a palpable chill in her wake. For a long moment, Alistair just looked at Maya, his grey eyes inscrutable. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt her palms begin to sweat. "Miss Ross," he began, his voice a low rumble. "I don't believe in coincidence. Nor do I believe in unwarranted sentimentality." He walked over to his desk, but didn't sit. He leaned against it, crossing his arms. "Last night my son was in distress. The staff of your establishment, and indeed its patrons, reacted with a predictable blend of fear and annoyance. You did not." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "You were not pitiful. You were not invasive. You were effective. You calmed him when I could not. That is a rare skill." Maya swallowed, finding her voice. "Your son was scared. I understood." "How?" The question was sharp, a surgeon's scalpel. "Are you a nurse? A therapist?" "No, sir. My mother. She has MS. I'm her primary caregiver. I've learned a few things about pain and panic, and how to just be present when that's all you can do." The admission felt deeply personal, a piece of her soul laid bare in this sterile, intimidating room. Alistair's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He seemed to be reassessing her, seeing past the cheap blouse and worn slacks. "I see," he said slowly. He pushed himself off the desk and walked over to Finn. He gently stroked his son's hair. Finn looked up at him, then over at Maya, and a small, hesitant smile touched his lips again. Alistair turned back to her. "I did not bring you here to thank you, Miss Ross. A cash tip covers gratitude. I brought you here to make you a proposition." Maya braced herself. He was going to offer her a job as Finn's nanny, a glorified babysitter. It was what she expected. "I am in the process of restructuring the Beaumont Foundation's philanthropic arm," he stated, his tone shifting back to that of a CEO. "I am allocating a significant new fund, $50 million, to a new initiative. It will focus on providing direct practical support to families with severely disabled children. Not medical research, but practical aid, respite care accessibility, modifications for homes, specialized educational tools, sensory-friendly community programs, things that make a tangible difference to daily life." He paused, letting the scale of it sink in. "I need someone to help manage the initial outreach, someone to be a point of contact to vet preliminary applications, to speak with families and understand their real, unvarnished needs. Not a bureaucrat or a social worker with a textbook, but someone with genuine lived experience. Someone who understands." Maya stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. This wasn't what she'd expected at all. "The position comes with a salary of $95,000 a year," he continued, as if discussing the weather. "Full health benefits for you and one dependent, a transportation stipend. You would report directly to me." The room tilted. $95,000. It was an impossible number, a figure from a fantasy. It was more money than she had ever dared to dream of. Full health benefits for her mother. The words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. It meant better doctors, better care. It meant hope. You're offering me a job," she stammered the words, feeling foreign in her mouth. "I am," he confirmed. "I don't hire based on resumes, Miss Ross. I hire based on results. Last night you achieved a result I have spent a fortune on therapists and specialists to attain, and you did it with nothing more than intuition and empathy. I believe you can translate that into this role." He saw the shock and disbelief on her face. "This is not charity," he said, his voice firm, almost harsh. "I assure you I expect you to be worth every penny. You will work harder than you ever have in your life. You will be scrutinized. My COO, Miss Dubois, for one believes I am making a sentimental and foolish mistake. It will be up to you to prove her wrong." He gestured around the vast office at the city, sprawling below them. "In my world, kindness is a commodity often feigned for personal gain. I need to know if what I saw last night was genuine. This is your chance to prove it on a scale that could help thousands of families like your own. Or you can walk away." Tears pricked at Maya's eyes, hot and sudden. She thought of the mountain of bills on her kitchen table. She thought of her mother's tired, pained smile. She thought of the shame and helplessness on Alistair Beaumont's face last night, a mirror of what she so often felt herself. And she thought of Finn's small hand in hers, the quiet trust in that simple gesture. She took a deep breath, stood up a little straighter, and looked the billionaire directly in the eye. "When do I start?" Starting a new job at Beaumont Enterprises was like being dropped into the deep end of the ocean without knowing how to swim. On her first day, Maya walked through the marble lobby, not in her worn-out slacks, but in a new, modestly priced suit she'd spent half the night agonizing over. It felt like a costume. The security guard who had eyed her with suspicion a week ago now nodded respectfully. "Good morning, Miss Ross." The world had already shifted on its axis. Her new office was not on the 88th floor, but on the 75th, the floor dedicated to the Beaumont Foundation. It was still luxurious with a large window overlooking the Hudson River, but it felt more subdued, less aggressively corporate than the executive suites above. It was also, she quickly discovered, a fishbowl. Her hiring had sent ripples through the foundation's staff. They were a team of polished professionals with degrees from Ivy League schools and backgrounds in non-profit management. And then there was Maya the waitress. They were polite to her face, their smiles professional and cool, but she felt their eyes on her back. She heard the whispers when she walked to the coffee machine, the sudden silences when she entered a room. To them, she was Beaumont's pet project, the waitress from the restaurant. The most formidable presence was Genevieve Dubois. The COO didn't work on this floor, but she found reasons to visit. She would appear in Maya's doorway, a sleek predator in a designer suit, her eyes sweeping over Maya's desk. "Settling in, are we?" Genevieve would ask, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Do let me know if you're struggling with the database software. It can be quite complex for beginners." Genevieve saw Maya not just as unqualified, but as a threat. Alistair Beaumont was a man who operated within a fortress of logic and control. Genevieve was his gatekeeper, the enforcer of that logic. Maya, with her storybook hiring and her direct line to the CEO, represented chaos. She was an emotional, unpredictable variable in Genevieve's meticulously crafted equation. Genevieve was determined to see her fail. Alistair, true to his word, was a demanding boss. He was precise, impatient, and expected perfection. He would summon her to his office on the 88th floor with a curt one-line email. She'd stand before his desk, her heart pounding as he grilled her on proposals and budgetary outlines. "This is vague," he'd say, tapping a finger on a report she'd spent days on. "I don't want platitudes about helping families. I want metrics. I want actionable plans. How do we identify the families most in need? What is our vetting process? How do we measure the impact of a sensory room versus respite care hours, think Ross? Don't just feel." It was terrifying and exhilarating. He was pushing her, forcing her to learn a new language of spreadsheets and strategic planning. But amidst the corporate rigor, there were glimpses of the man from the restaurant. Those glimpses always involved Finn. Part of her role, as Alistair defined it, was experiential consultation. Twice a week she would spend the afternoon with Alistair and Finn. These were not nanny sessions. They were working meetings. They would visit a potential community partner, a therapy center, a special needs playground, and Alistair would observe his mind all business, while Maya would interact with Finn. It was in these moments that the wall between them became permeable. Away from the glass tower, Alistair's shoulders would lose some of their rigidity. He watched Maya with Finn, not as a boss evaluating an employee, but as a father learning. She taught Finn how to use a simple communication app on his tablet, tapping icons that spoke words for him. His first deliberate sentence was, "More blue paint." The joy that lit up his face was radiant. Alistair, standing by the door of the art therapy room, looked on with an expression of such raw, unguarded pride that it made Maya's breath catch. She showed Alistair how to create a sensory diet for Finn, a schedule of activities that could help him regulate his responses to the world. A half hour on a swing set, 10 minutes with weighted blankets, 5 minutes of deep pressure hugs. Simple things that made a world of difference. "You see him?" Alistair said one afternoon, his voice quiet. They were watching Finn happily finger-painting, blissfully covered in red and yellow. The therapists, the doctors, they see a collection of symptoms, a diagnosis. you see him. He's a great kid, Maya said simply. He's smart and funny. You just have to learn his language. The bond between Maya and Finn grew into a genuine, uncomplicated friendship. He would light up when she arrived, tapping his tablet to greet her. He showed her his favorite books and let her listen to his favorite music through his special bone conduction headphones. With her, he was relaxed, communicative, and joyful. This progress did not go unnoticed. Maya started to see a change in how Alistair treated her. The curt emails were sometimes followed by a simple, "Good work." His critiques became more constructive, his questions less like interrogations and more like collaborations. Her first major project was to design a pilot program for what she called Oasis kits. These were boxes filled with sensory tools, weighted lap pads, noise-cancelling headphones, fidget toys, textured fabrics, to be distributed to 100 low-income families. It was a small, practical idea born from her own experiences of trying to calm her mother during spasms of pain. She presented the proposal to Alistair and Genevieve. Genevieve was immediately dismissive. "A box of toys, Mr. Beaumont," she said with a condescending smile. "While I appreciate Miss Ross's enthusiasm, $50 million is meant for significant large-scale impact, not arts and crafts projects. The optics are frivolous." "The impact isn't for the media, Genevieve. It's for the child having a meltdown in a grocery store," Maya countered, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "It's for the parent who hasn't had a peaceful car ride in 3 years. This isn't frivolous. It's a lifeline." Alistair was silent for a long moment, looking from Genevieve's polished cynicism to Maya's impassioned sincerity. "Prepare a budget and a distribution plan, Ross," he said finally. "Run the pilot." The look Genevieve shot Maya was venomous. It was a declaration of war. The Oasis Kit pilot was a resounding success. Maya worked tirelessly, coordinating with social workers and family support groups. The feedback poured in emails and letters from grateful parents. A mother who was able to take her autistic son to the movies for the first time. A father whose daughter used the weighted pad to get through a family dinner without a single outburst. Maya compiled the testimonials into a report and sent it to Alistair. The next morning, a single email was in her inbox. Subject: Oasis Kits. From Alistair Beaumont, expand the program. I'm allocating an additional $2 million to it. Come to my office at 4 p.m. to discuss scaling up. Maya read the email 3 times, a huge smile spreading across her face. She had done it. She was making a difference. She had proven him right. She had proven Genevieve wrong. She leaned back in her chair, looking out at the city view that no longer felt so intimidating. For the first time, she felt like she belonged in this gilded cage. But she was dangerously unaware that the more she succeeded, the more determined her enemy was to see her fall. And Genevieve Dubois never ever lost. Genevieve Dubois had not risen to the position of COO at a multi-billion-dollar empire by being sentimental. She was a creature of logic, power, and calculated risk. And she saw Maya Ross as a cancer in the organization, an emotional, illogical element that threatened the sterile order she had worked so hard to maintain. More than that, Maya's growing influence with Alistair was a direct threat to her own. Genevieve had plans long-term ambitions that involved becoming Alistair's indispensable right hand, perhaps even his successor. The waitress from Queens was an unacceptable variable. Her first attacks had been subtle, losing Maya's memos, forgetting to invite her to key meetings, making backhanded comments about her lack of a business degree, in front of other executives. But the success of the Oasis Kits project changed the game. Maya was no longer just a pet project. She had influence. She had a budget. She had Alistair's ear. The subtle approach had failed. It was time for a more direct assault. Genevieve began to play on Alistair's deepest wound, his past. She knew the story of Finn's mother, Annabelle. Everyone in the inner circle did. Annabelle hadn't been able to cope with Finn's diagnosis. The endless appointments, the therapies, the shattered dream of a perfect family. It had broken her. She had left not with a dramatic scene, but with a quiet, devastating letter abandoning both her son and her husband. The betrayal had hollowed Alistair out, encasing his heart in ice. It was the source of his distrust, his fear of emotional vulnerability. Genevieve started planting seeds of poison. "It's wonderful to see how Finn has taken to Miss Ross," she said to Alistair one afternoon, her tone perfectly calibrated to sound sincere. "It's just, I hope the boy doesn't become too attached. People can be unpredictable. Their situations change. Their loyalties shift." The implication hung in the air, a venomous echo of Annabelle's departure. Another time, while reviewing the Foundation's finances, she pointed to Maya's salary and benefits package. An incredibly generous package, life-changing for someone from her background. It's amazing what people will do when offered that kind of money. She let the words sink in, framing Maya's kindness, not as genuine, but as a performance bought and paid for. Alistair, a man conditioned by betrayal, began to listen. The old doubts, the familiar paranoia started to creep back in. He started watching Maya with a new, colder analysis. Was her warmth with Finn an act? Was her dedication to the job just a calculated play for more money, more security? His past was a poisoned well, and Genevieve was drawing from it with expert precision. The moment to strike came with the Foundation's biggest project of the year, a partnership with a cutting-edge technology firm. Neuralink, to develop affordable, customized communication software for non-verbal children. It was a $10 million investment. Impressed with her work, Alistair had given Maya a significant role. She was to be the liaison with the families selected for the initial beta test. Her job was to gather their feedback document, their experiences, and compile the final report that would determine whether Beaumont Enterprises would proceed with the full investment. It was a huge responsibility, a massive vote of confidence. Maya threw herself into the project with everything she had. She spent weeks with the families, learning their stories, documenting their children's struggles and triumphs with the new software. The project was her life's purpose solidified. The final report was her masterpiece, a 60-page document filled with data analytics and deeply moving personal testimonials. It was the proof that this technology would change lives. The final presentation was scheduled for a Friday morning with Alistair, Genevieve, and the board of the Neuralink company. The entire $10 million deal hinged on this meeting. Maya saved the final version of her report and the accompanying presentation slideshow onto a specific secure folder on the Beaumont server, as was protocol. She emailed a confirmation to Alistair and Genevieve's assistants, feeling a profound sense of pride and accomplishment. The night before the meeting, Genevieve stayed late. Citing a need to review the materials, she accessed the secure folder. Her credentials as COO gave her unrestricted access. With a few keystrokes, she downloaded a copy of Maya's entire report. Then she opened the original file. She didn't delete the whole thing, that would be too obvious. Instead, she expertly corrupted it, making it appear as a damaged, unopenable file. She did the same to the presentation slideshow. Finally, she deleted the server's automatic backup file from the past 24 hours, an act of supreme overreach that only her high-level clearance would allow, and erased the system logs of her activity. It was a clean, brutal act of corporate sabotage. The next morning, Maya arrived early, buzzing with nervous energy. She walked into the boardroom where the stern-faced executives from Neuralink were already assembled. Genevieve was there looking cool and composed. Alistair sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "Miss Ross," Alistair said, his voice flat. "You may begin." Maya smiled, took a deep breath, and clicked the remote to begin her slideshow. On the massive screen, instead of her title slide, a single error message appeared. "File cannot be opened. Data is corrupt." A cold dread washed over her. "I'm sorry, just a technical glitch," she stammered, her hands fumbling with the laptop. She tried to open the file directly from the server. The same error message. She tried to open her main report. Corrupted. Panic seized her. I don't understand. It was all here last night. I checked it." Genevieve sighed, a theatrical sound of disappointment. "Miss Ross, are you saying you don't have a copy of the presentation or the report?" My backup is on the server." Maya's voice trailed off as the IT technician hastily confirmed that the backup file had also been corrupted. It was gone. Everything. Weeks of work vanished into thin air. The Neuralink executives began shifting uncomfortably, exchanging annoyed glances. Their time was being wasted. Alistair's face was like thunder. He looked at Maya, and in his eyes she saw no sympathy, no understanding. She saw only the cold, hard glint of suspicion. He saw a catastrophic failure, an unbelievable level of incompetence. Genevieve's poison had done its work. He wasn't seeing his capable, empathetic employee. He was seeing a girl in over her head, an irresponsible hire who had just jeopardized a $10 million deal. "This is unacceptable," Alistair said, his voice lethally quiet. The words struck Maya like a slap. "But She started, desperate. "Perhaps," Genevieve interjected smoothly, "I can salvage the situation." She opened her own laptop. "While I had concerns about Miss Ross leading such a crucial project, I took the liberty of reviewing her preliminary data last week and put together a contingency presentation. It's more of a top-line summary, of course, lacking the personal touches, but it contains the core metrics." With a click, a polished, professional slideshow appeared on the screen. It was a stripped-down, sterile version of Maya's work, all her heartfelt testimonials replaced with cold data points. Genevieve presented it flawlessly, her corporate jargon impressing the Neuralink board. She was saving the day. She was the hero. Maya stood frozen, watching her work being presented by the woman who had stolen it. She felt the blood drain from her face as the full, horrifying truth of what had happened crashed down on her. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. This was sabotage. She looked at Alistair, pleading with her eyes for him to see, to understand. But his face was a stony mask. He had already convicted her. After the meeting, which Genevieve managed to save, he called Maya into his office. Finn was not there. "I gave you an opportunity, Miss Ross," he said, his voice raw with controlled anger. "An opportunity of a lifetime. I gave you my trust, and you responded with this spectacular display of negligence." "It wasn't negligence," Maya cried, tears of frustration and betrayal streaming down her face. "The files were there. They were fine. Someone did this. Genevieve, do not. Alistair cut her off, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Attempt to shift blame for your own incompetence. Miss Dubois salvaged a deal you nearly destroyed. You have proven her right about you from the very beginning. Every word was a dagger. He was throwing her own story back in her face, twisted and ugly. The trust he'd given her was gone, replaced by the old familiar wall of ice. I am placing you on administrative leave, effective immediately, he said coldly. Security will escort you from the building. I will make a decision about your future employment next week. He turned away from her and looked out his window, a silent, final dismissal. The message was clear. Her time in the gilded cage was over. She was the waitress from Queens, again cast out and disgraced. The walk out of Beaumont Tower was the longest, most humiliating journey of Maya's life. Flanked by a silent security guard, she felt the burn of 100 pairs of eyes. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were a verdict. She was a failure, a fraud. The dream had imploded. For 2 days she stayed in her apartment, the shades drawn, the world shut out. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She had let everyone down. Alistair, Finn, her mother, herself. The hope that had bloomed so brightly just days before was now a pile of ashes. Her mother Laura watched her with knowing, sad eyes from her bed. "This isn't you, Maya," she said, her voice weak but firm. "The girl I raised doesn't hide. She fights." "How can I fight a ghost, Mum?" Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "I have no proof. It's my word against the COO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He's already made up his mind." "Then you make him unmake it," Laura insisted. "Truth has a weight of its own. You just have to find a way to put it on the scale." Her mother's words, spoken with such effort, sparked a tiny ember in the darkness. Quitting was what Genevieve wanted. Hiding was admitting defeat. Maya thought of the families from the Neurolink project, of Finn, of the purpose she had found. She couldn't let it be stolen from her by a lie. On the 3rd day, she got up, showered, and put on the same suit she'd worn on her first day. She couldn't get into the Beaumont building, but she had an idea. There was one person who might have seen something, one person who existed outside the corporate hierarchy. She went to a small coffee shop near the tower and waited. Every evening around 6, a young, lanky IT technician named Ben, who had a crush on one of the Foundation's junior assistants, would leave the building. Ben was the one who had been summoned to the boardroom. He had a kind face and always seemed flustered. When he emerged, she intercepted him. "Ben, can I talk to you for a second? I'm Maya Ross." He looked terrified, as if speaking to her was a fireable offense. I'm not supposed to. Please," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I'm not asking you to do anything wrong. I just need to understand what happened. In the boardroom, you said the backups were corrupted too. How is that possible? I thought the system backed up automatically." Ben glanced around nervously. "It does," he whispered. "Every hour, a corruption that perfect, that hits the primary file, the hourly backup, and leaves no trace. That's not a glitch. That's a surgical strike. You'd need the highest level of admin privileges to do that. And you'd have to know exactly how to cover your tracks by wiping the access logs." "Highest level of admin privileges?" Maya asked. "Who has that?" Ben swallowed hard. "Basically Mr. Beaumont, the head of IT, and Miss Dubois." It was the confirmation she needed. "Is there any way to recover those logs, Ben? Any deep system archive?" "No," he said, shaking his head. Whoever did it was a pro. They're gone. I'm sorry, Maya. I believe you, but there's no digital fingerprint. He looked genuinely apologetic before hurrying away. No digital fingerprint. Maya's heart sank. But then she thought about Genevieve. She was a pro. She was meticulous. She would have used her work computer to be safe. But what about the file she stole? She wouldn't have just memorized 60 pages of data. She would have had to print it, or at least have a copy to work from, to create her contingency presentation. The ember of an idea flared into a flame. Meanwhile, in his sterile office, Alistair Beaumont was drowning in the bitter satisfaction of being right. He had allowed himself a moment of weakness of sentiment, and he had been burned. Maya Ross was just like Annabelle. Unreliable. A disappointment. He had almost let himself trust her. Almost let her and Finn build a bond. The thought made him furious. He spent the weekend in his cavernous penthouse, the silence broken only by the quiet hum of Finn's medical equipment. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. Finn was sullen, withdrawn. He refused to use the communication app Maya had taught him, pushing the tablet away with a frustrated cry. He kept looking at the door as if expecting her to walk through it. She's not coming. Finn, Alistair said, his voice harsher than he intended. Finn looked at his father, and for the first time Alistair saw not just frustration in his son's eyes, but accusation. The image haunted him. He found himself replaying the scene in the boardroom. Maya's genuine panic, her utter devastation. It felt real. And then there was Genevieve, so perfectly poised, so conveniently prepared. Too conveniently. Driven by a sliver of doubt, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went to his safe and pulled out a small locked box. Inside was the last remnant of his failed marriage, the letter Annabelle had left him. He had read it only once in a blur of rage and grief. He remembered only the words of abandonment. He forced himself to read it again a decade later. This time he saw what he had been blind to before. It wasn't just a letter of abandonment. It was a cry for help. I look at Finn, and I see our beautiful boy Annabelle had written, but I also see a mountain I cannot climb. I feel like I'm suffocating Ali. The doctors, the therapies, the looks of pity. They are burying me alive. I am breaking. I am not strong enough. Forgive me for being so weak. I have to go, or I will pull you both down into the darkness with me. It wasn't a rejection of their son. It was a confession of her own catastrophic mental breakdown of a depression so deep she thought leaving was the only way to save them. He had been so wrapped up in his own sense of betrayal that he had completely missed her pain. He had built his entire emotional fortress on a misinterpretation, on a foundation of his own wounded pride. He looked at the letter, then thought of Maya. He had accused her of the same crime, of failing, of being a liability, when the evidence of her success was all around him in his own son's newfound happiness. He was projecting his past, his pain with Annabelle onto her. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. What if he was wrong? His phone buzzed. It was a text from his head of security. Mr. Beaumont, you asked to be alerted to any unusual activity. Maya Ross entered the building a few minutes ago. She used a visitor's pass obtained by Ben Carter in IT. She's heading for the 75th floor. Alistair's heart hammered in his chest. What was she doing? Maya's plan was a long shot. Ben, taking a huge risk, had given her his pass for a 10-minute window while he created a network issue on another floor that would draw away the evening security patrols. Her target, Genevieve's office. She didn't go for the computer. She went for the one thing a narcissist like Genevieve would never think to hide the trash. Corporate offices used secure shredding bins for sensitive documents, but for everyday printing, a regular recycling bin under the desk. Her hands shook as she quickly sorted through discarded papers, memos, printouts of stock prices, and then pay dirt. Tucked near the bottom were several pages crumpled in frustration. They were drafts of a presentation. Her presentation. She could see her own sentences, her own phrasing with Genevieve's edits scrawled in the margins in red ink. And at the very bottom, stapled together, was a printout of the full 60-page report, the one that was supposedly erased. Genevieve had printed it to study it, then carelessly tossed her draft notes. Just as she pulled the papers from the bin, the door to the office swung open. Genevieve Dubois stood there, a triumphant, cruel smile on her face. "Looking for something, Miss Ross? I had a feeling you were too stupid to just walk away." Behind her in the hallway stood Alistair Beaumont, his face a grim, unreadable mask. He had come down to see what was happening only to find the scene he dreaded most, Maya seemingly caught red-handed, rummaging through his COO's private office. The air in Genevieve's office was electric. Genevieve stood with a triumphant smile while Maya clutched the crumpled papers that were her only proof. In the doorway, Alistair Beaumont's face was a mask of grim conflict. "As you can see, Mr. Beaumont," Genevieve said smoothly. "She broke into my office. Clearly she's unstable. I recommend we terminate her immediately." Alistair's gaze moved from Genevieve's smug face to Maya's. He saw no guilt, only righteous fury. He had spent a decade misreading one person's pain. He wouldn't make the same mistake again. "What are you holding, Maya?" he asked, his voice steady. Finding her voice, Maya held up the documents. "My report. The one that was supposedly corrupted. And these are Genevieve's notes where she plagiarized my work to create her contingency plan." "That's an absurd lie," Genevieve scoffed. "Is it?" Maya challenged, her fear replaced by fire. "Then explain this page. It's a quote from Mrs. Davies about her son using the software to say, 'I love you' for the first time. I cried when she told me. Is that your research, Genevieve? Did you cry with Mrs. Davies?" The direct hit left Genevieve momentarily speechless. The color drained from her face. Alistair's expression hardened. "The file corruption required C-level administrative access, Genevieve. An access level that besides myself and our IT head, only you possess." He didn't need to say more. The truth was starkly clear. "Pack your personal effects. You're finished at Beaumont Enterprises." "You're choosing her over me," Genevieve shrieked, her composure shattering. "The waitress, she has an integrity you could never comprehend," Alistair said, his voice ice. "Now leave." After Genevieve stormed out, a heavy silence fell. Alistair turned to Maya, his regret palpable. "I was wrong, Maya. I let my own past blind me, and I am truly sorry." He knew words weren't enough. "Come with me," he said. He didn't take her to his penthouse. He drove her home to Queens. Standing in her humble living room, seeing the stack of medical bills and meeting her mother Laura, he finally understood the true source of her strength and character. Looking at Maya, he made a decision that would redefine their future. "Your job is waiting for you. In fact, I'm creating a new role, Director of the Family Initiatives Division. You will have full autonomy and your own team. You won't report to me. You will work with me. As a partner." It was more than an apology. It was a profound act of faith, forging a new beginning, not in the cold glass of a boardroom, but in a small apartment filled with quiet, unshakable integrity. 1 year later, the 75th floor of Beaumont Tower was a different world. The cold corporate art was gone, replaced by vibrant paintings made by children and photos of smiling families. It was the home of the Family Initiatives Division, a thriving force for good under the confident leadership of its director, Maya Ross. Maya herself was transformed. The anxious waitress was gone, replaced by a poised leader whose work had changed thousands of lives through programs like the Oasis kits and the Finn's voice communication software. This new life had allowed her to provide her mother Laura with the best medical care and a beautiful new apartment where the light was finally returning to her eyes. Alistair was also a new man, his cold armor replaced by the warmth of a dedicated father. Their partnership was not one of romance, but of a rare, profound respect, a family forged by circumstance. The greatest transformation, however, was Finn. He was thriving, happy, and communicative. On a Tuesday afternoon, Finn zoomed into Maya's office in his wheelchair, his father laughing behind him. He stopped at her desk and tapped a message onto his tablet. The synthesized voice was cheerful. "Hello, Maya. I have a surprise for you." He held out a piece of paper. It was a painting, a swirling mess of blue and green, but in the center was the distinct figure of a woman with brown hair holding the hand of a small boy. Tears filled Maya's eyes. "Thank you." Finn tapped out on his screen, a huge grin on his face. Alistair watched from the doorway, his heart full. In Maya's simple act of kindness a year ago, he hadn't just found an employee. He had found the missing piece of his family and a purpose beyond his wealth. It wasn't a fairy tale ending bought with money. It was a real-life beginning, earned through compassion, forgiveness, and the enduring power of a single human touch. The story of Maya, Alistair, and Finn is a powerful reminder that our lives can pivot in an instant, not on grand gestures, but on the small, quiet moments of choice. The choice to be kind when others are cruel. The choice to be brave when you are terrified. And the choice to see the person, not the circumstance. Maya's single act of empathy didn't just earn her a job. It unearthed her purpose, healed a broken family, and created a ripple of kindness that would touch thousands of lives. It proves that you don't need $1 billion to change the world. Sometimes all you need is an open heart and the courage to reach out your hand. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power we all hold to make a difference, please let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on kindness, second chances, and the unexpected heroes among us. And don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will inspire and move you. Thank you for watching.